Good evening and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. I'm Lisa Friend and I'm delighted to be your moderator this evening as Rick unpacks his rucksack and brings us up to date with all the latest from Europe. Thank you for joining us tonight, whether you are here for the first time or the 201st time, and whether you're joining us on Zoom or on YouTube. There you go. It's a pleasure spending time with you this evening. Before we begin, please allow me a few introductory comments. For the rest of the month, we have two great shows, Dresden, Germany with Seema Prakash on July 21st, and Hut to Hut Hiking in the Alps with Sherry Goodwin on July 28th. Now, please, put your travel dreams in the upright and locked position as I have the pleasure to introduce our host for the evening, Rick Steves. Hello, Rick.
Hey, Lisa, thank you for the good introduction. And I just love the way you and your crew run Monday Night Travel. We just celebrated our 200th Monday, and now we're just off into a wild blue yonder. And I'm looking forward just to sharing with all of you in a kind of catch-all basket of travel delights what I've been doing this year. I've had 3 trips to Europe so far. And I just thought I would collect all the slides and the photographs I've taken and the lessons I've learned and share them with you tonight. So as Lisa mentioned, Emily and Lisa will be collecting your questions, and we'll have a good Q&A session at the end. But I'm just thankful that you're all here. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying your summer. And I just got back from England a couple weeks ago, had a wonderful shoot there. We were making a TV show, and I've got some updates to share with you. So once again, thanks for being part of our family. And I'm just going to dive right in here. This is going to be kind of a, well, to be candid, kind of just a random stream of consciousness river of tips and experiences that I've learned so far this year, 2025, what's going on in Europe. And starting with this shot here, this is frantic, crowded, intense Rome. It's Jubilee year and millions of pilgrims are in town. And I wanted to go to Rome and find out just how bad was it. And this really illustrates the point I've been making a lot lately. You can go to the Colosseum and be inundated by crowds and put on your shoulder pads and work your way through that site. Or you can walk 15 minutes away and come here to the 2,000-year-old baths of Caracalla, where tens of thousands of people would go for their beautiful recreation in ancient Roman Empire times. Look at this beautiful site. Look at the dramatic Roman engineering, and imagine that you could go there yourself. Look at this is a particularly crowded day. There's 2 people here. But that's the point I really want to make. Of course, we want to see the Colosseum, and of course, we want to go to St. Peter's Basilica. But there's always places that are just really impressive that don't have the crowds. The big question this year for Rome, of course, was just what kind of an impact is Jubilee going to have? Every 25 years, the Pope throws a party, and millions of devout Catholics come to Rome as a kind of pilgrimage. And if you're going to do the pilgrimage stuff, you're going to have a lot of crowds. But otherwise, I find that a lot of the tourists stay away. And Rome is about normal this year. It's just crowded if you go to the famous places, but there's plenty of options to get into Rome without the intensity. Trevi Fountain, that's going to be crowded. And it was crowded. It was about as crowded as I've ever seen it, but that's one of the famous sites. When I look at my slides and my photographs, more often than not, I'm just grimacing at the camera because I'm running ahead with the TV crew trying to figure out what is a good on-camera spot. And then I show it to my producer and I say, should we do the on-camera here? So here I'm standing in front of the the Pantheon. I was thinking, why am I not looking very happy? Well, I'm thinking about the TV and the production, and we're running like mad because we took our crew to Rome and we made a 1-hour special on Rome. I am so excited, by the way, with our TV production coming up. We're releasing our 13th season. That's 11 all-new shows in October. And then we have shot 4 1-hour specials on my 4 favorite big cities in Europe, London, Paris, Rome, and Istanbul. And tonight we're going to go to 3 of those cities, London, Istanbul, and Rome, because I was there with the crew producing these 1-hour shows. I'll tell you, it's a luxury to be able to do a 1-hour show on a great city. That's like 7,000 words instead of 3,500 words, and it works really, really well. So we've got great shows coming up. In Rome, they're doing their best to keep order. Sometimes I think they're going overboard. Here we have the Spanish Steps, And the police are actually on the beloved Spanish steps, making sure nobody sits down. I kind of got a kick out of just watching the police run over, and every time somebody would sit down, they'd chew them out and say, "You can't sit down." Well, you just got to roll with the punches when you're out after dark in Rome, I guess. Whenever we're in Rome, we are joined by Francesca Caruso. You've seen her on my TV shows. If you've been on any of our tours, you know she's likely to be your local guide when you're in Rome. And Francesca is the person I really want on my team when I'm filming in Rome. Francesca made sure all of our filming went well. This was kind of a sentimental season for me as a TV producer because my partner in crime, Simon Griffith, is retiring. After 25 years or something producing TV with me, Simon is saying, "Yep, I'm going to just retire now." So Simon has been working to make sure that our TV production department is in good shape for the next generation. And Josh Springer is joining us. So Josh has been traveling with Simon and me in Istanbul, in London, and in Rome. And Josh will be the new Simon going forward. It was fun for me as the host and the writer of the scripts to invite Josh into our inner circle. Here is a tradition we call scrubbing the script. I'm typically laying down in my hotel room on the bed, and Simon and Josh are there. We've all got a copy of the script, and every word has to earn its keep. I think I'm just so proud of the quality of the scripts that we produce and the intensity of the content and how well the shows are designed. That's not accidental. There's a lot of scrubbing, hours and hours of scrubbing the script that goes on, and here Josh is joining us. While we were in London, we wanted to feature the wonderful food. And of course, we had some beautiful food to share with the TV show. You know, I want to just mention something that's kind of new in my life, and it's called Chat GPT. I'm not very techie. I just had a friend of mine introduce me to Chat GPT a couple days ago. And there's scary things about it, of course, but talk about a powerful tool. I was preparing for today's presentation. I love this shot. Look at that. This is almost food porn. And I wanted to know just exactly what is that? I mean, I knew it was zucchini flowers, but I wasn't sure if that was burrata behind it. So I saved the photo, I put it in Chat GPT, and I said, "What is this?" And within 20 seconds, I got a printout that pretty much said everything I wanted to know. This image shows a dish featuring carciofi alla giudea, Jewish-style artichokes, a classic Roman Jewish specialty. There's deep-fried artichokes that become crispy on the outside while remaining tender on the inside. The artichokes in the image have been flattened during frying, which is a tradition for this dish. Next to one of the artichokes is what appears to be burrata, or mozzarella, a cheese base with some arugula or rocket, oven-dried tomatoes, and possibly a slice of bread or toast underneath. Oh my goodness, this dish is both rustic and refined, typically served as an antipasto or starter in Roman cuisine. What's not to like about that? You take a photograph of something, you forget what it is, or you want to know what it is, just put it up on GPT and say, "What is that?" And you learn. That's beautiful. Wow. Ooh, so is that. When we're making our TV show, we want good-looking food as well as tasty food. We want food that's appropriate to the culture. And one of my favorite photographs is the plate after it's gone. Kandinsky, delicious. When I'm on the road, I keep meeting people that look like me. And I don't know they look at me, but they know they look at me because they tell me on the road they're always mistaken as me. And it's kind of fun. I've got a whole collection of these photographs. I should put them all together. But I met this nice gentleman on the road a little while ago. From Rome, we went to Istanbul. I love the efficiency of hopping on a plane in Rome, and in a couple hours later, you're in Istanbul. And if you're a Muslim, during the flight, you know exactly which direction Mecca is, so you can pray in the right direction. When we landed in Istanbul, I noticed on the departure board a direct flight to Kathmandu. Well, if you've followed me in the last year, you know On the Hippie Trail has been my big news, and that was the ultimate road trip, taking backpackers and vagabonds and hippies and seekers from Istanbul to Kathmandu in about 6 weeks. You can do it in about 6 hours here, or 6 or 8 hours. And it just blew me away to think you could fly direct and miss all that fun on the ground. I think you miss a lot when you fly because you don't cross borders and you don't get away from the big cities. This is the airport in Istanbul. It is the most overbuilt airport I have ever seen. It is just huge in every possible way. And Turkey is looking into the future, that's for sure. And this city connects the past with the future. Istanbul, 20 million people. It was so exciting to be there scouting, working on the script, and then coming back with the TV crew to make this updated show on Istanbul. If you go to my website at ricksteves.com, you can see every TV show we've ever produced, and you can go back and look at the Istanbul show, and I think it's 15 years old now, and it's half an hour. 2025, we've produced a 1 hour special on Istanbul. I'm so excited about it. It's just a beautiful city for traveling. Here's the Galata Bridge. And this is Lali. And Lali is my go-to guide when I'm in Istanbul. She and her husband Tan run a tour company. They've got a line on so many great tour guides. And one of the most thriving parts of our tour program at Rick Steves Europe is our Turkey tours. Whenever I take a loved one on a tour, it's generally Turkey, because I think Turkey is the most impactful of the 40 itineraries that we offer on Rick Steves Tours. But we were with Lali, and we happened to be there during Ramadan. And one night we were filming the mosque, and everybody was waiting for the sun to go down so they could break their fast and having picnics together. And we got done with the shooting and went back to the hotel. We thought, we should have shot the Ramadan festivities. We went back the next night, and it was an amazing scene. It was a beautiful community scene, peaceful people reading sacred texts, reading poetry, connecting with different generations, getting close to God in a Muslim Ramadan kind of way. And then as soon as that sun goes down, the minarets start to wail and people dig in. It was a beautiful experience. It's a beautiful experience. And if different religious rituals seem hard to understand, make a point to talk to somebody local and find out what's going on. Because when you have the context, more often than not, it becomes a beautiful part of your travel experience. For me to walk in that park and appreciate what was happening as these Muslim Turks enjoyed the Ramadan festival and the joy of breaking that fast. There's a lot of people in Istanbul. What did I just mention? 20 million people. That's a lot of crush. And there's a lot of political activity in Istanbul as well. Just like the United States is having its democracy threatened by Trump, Turkey is having its democracy threatened by Erdogan. These guys are buddies. They kind of admire each other. And Erdogan is reading from the same fascist playbook that our president is, and any wannabe autocrat that wants to derail this democracy. And in Turkey, Erdogan is doing a good job, man. If you want to see an autocrat turn a country upside down and end its democracy, see what Erdogan's doing. He just arrested the mayor of Istanbul. If there's one person in Turkey, this is a country of 70 million people or so, that is like Gavin Newsom in our country, kind of the progressive, possible threat to the guy in power, it would be the mayor of Istanbul. And Erdogan, just before we arrived, arrested the mayor of Istanbul, threw him in jail, literally, for trumped-up charges. And when we were there working, there were 1 million people in the streets demonstrating, 1 million people demonstrating for democracy on the streets of Istanbul. And we wondered, is this going to impact our shooting? But no, it was just Turks that were just determined to speak up for their democracy, to be in the streets, raising their voices for democracy. And you can bet Erdogan had the police force out there. And everywhere we looked, we could find the police presence. And we could imagine what is going on with the dimension of Turkish society that treasures its democracy. It was a fascinating time to be there. It's a perfectly comfortable time to be there from a tourism point of view. And it's a fascinating time to be there if you're curious about this rising tide of autocrats that are all reading the same playbooks that European dictators read 100 years ago to upend their societies and silence the judiciary, silence the universities, silence journalism, attack the deep state, and take the reins of society into their own hands, usurping all the democratic sensibilities. Somehow, Turkey is going to survive. They've had their democracy for 100 years, and I believe they're determined to keep it. But it's a challenge. When you're in Turkey, you can see the investment in this country, the infrastructure. How do you move the people in a city of 20 million people? We were caught in a crush once while we were out shooting, and I was actually scared. It's the most scared I've been in years in Europe, to be caught in these crowd situations with our gear. And just reminded me how tough it is to keep a city moving with millions and millions of people. Here we are packed onto the tram. In Istanbul, there's one tram line, it's number one, that really functions well, taking everybody, it laces together all the great sites. With Lali's help, we were able to just have a great time getting access and permission and all the most important cultural treasures. Here we are in the Hagia Sophia Mosque. It was, in its day, the greatest church in Christendom. For centuries, it was the biggest dome in the Western world. And just recently, it's gone from a museum back to a functioning mosque. One thing about Erdogan, he is violating the Ataturk-given separation of mosque and state in Turkey. Just like in our country, Trump now says pastors can tell you who to vote for from the pulpit. There's this notion that we should bring the politics into the churches, Christian nationalism, Muslim nationalism. It's the thing of right-wing dictators, frankly. Under the streets, you see what it took to bring water to the first city around that had 1 million people in it. Istanbul, in ancient times called Constantinople, named after Emperor Constantine, had these giant cisterns, and they're beautiful architecturally, and we got to go down there and learn more about how they just provided the plumbing of a city that big. This is a man I've been visiting for 20 years in the market. And as I was preparing today, I thought I'm going to use my Chat GPT again. So I wrote in Chat GPT, who is the man, the silversmith at the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul that Rick Steves visits? And right away, I got my information because I had forgotten his name. And what I heard was Rick Steves highlights Ayhan, a goldsmith in the Master of All Eunuchs alley. That's quite a name for an alley, the Master of All Eunuchs alley. Ayhan is a particularly memorable craftsman during his visit to Istanbul's Grand Bazaar. In his writing, Steves recounts meeting Ayhan in a small, soot-stained workshop in the back courtyard. Ayhan demonstrated melting gold shavings and silver fragments in a furnace and quickly produced a small gold brick, which Steves held in his hand. So that was a clip I made 15 years ago, and that's accurate, and it was just 1 minute to get so that I could remember his name is Ayhan and affirm what he does and where he's located. And there he is. And we filmed it in 2025, just like we did in that same spot 15 years ago. What a thrill to be able to see an artisan like this in action. One of my chores in Istanbul was to find good places for on-cameras. I just have a thing about finding good places for on-cameras. And on-camera is an opportunity to really have kind of a twofer. I've got something important to say, and I want to say it in a beautiful setting that fits what I'm talking about. It's not always possible to do that, but we do our darndest. And this is a good example of a spot that we determined would be good for an on-camera. By the way, you want to minimize the on-cameras when you're making a TV show. Anytime you can cover something with visuals, it's better to look at what you're talking about than the person who's talking. But in some cases in the script, when you're talking about concepts, you can't really cover that with visuals. So you pick a nice spot and you have what's called an on-camera. I was having to talk about the importance from a strategic point of view of the wall that turned the peninsula, which was fortified on 3 sides by water, just by adding one wall, made it totally fortified all the way around. And I was looking around, and this is one of those shots where I just take a quick selfie, bring it back to my producer, Simon, or Josh, and they check it out, and they go, yeah, we can do it on camera there. The light's good, the sound's good, the frame's good. That's a nice spot for an on-camera. Here's a spot. We went all the way to a place called Ortaköy, which I really like because it's got this Baroque-style mosque which is kind of European with its frills. And it's right there where you've got the bridge, the epic bridge that connects Asia and Europe. And to see a mosque, which is a European style mosque, with the bridge that physically connects to Asia and Europe in a little resort community on the edge of town in Istanbul, I just love that. So I went all the way out there, and the water was too filled with garbage. The light was not good. Everything was muddy, and it just looked grubby. And we did not do it as an on-camera, but we tried. And that's all we can do sometimes. I wanted to have activities. When I'm doing a TV show, the more activities we can do, the more experiences we can have, the more we inspire people to have experiences on their own. Experience is what distinguishes a good traveler. How can you have those hands-on experiences? Like get a shave in a traditional Turkish barber shop. And this finishes with a flame. They spank your face with a flaming rag to burn off all those stray hairs in your ears and, and so on. Wow, what a great thing to have on camera. That'll be a good bit on the TV show. Another experiences we wanted was to go to the venerable, famous old Ottoman bathhouses and get a good sudsy massage and soak with these mystical sort of domes and light slashing through the centuries-old marble ambiance of the place. This was me 15 years ago on the slab, the same slab, and this is me just a month ago on the same slab again. We had to figure out how to get the camera to work, not getting all steamed up by the humidity in there, but it's a great bit. Oh man, it's a good bit. Well, back at the old center of town, the Hippodrome, we have Hagia Sophia. And that was the big, take the minarets away, and then you got Justinian's amazing church from the 600s, 1400 years ago. And then, of course, when the Muslims came in, big church like that, well, you paint over all the Christian stuff and you stick on your Muslim decoration and you throw up a few minarets and you turn the old church into a mosque. This is a beautiful, beautiful mosque. Went in a year ago, it was a museum. Now it's a functioning mosque again, and the tourists are allowed upstairs to look down from the mezzanine level. I like that. It's just a beautiful, powerful place to go. The tourists are up there. Actually, tourists can go into the worship area too, but you just have to be worshipful in order to get down there. One thing I wanted to show was whirling dervishes. And I wanted to show them actually praying, because this is how these monks pray. And I wanted to go to the equivalent of a church service, a mosque service, and be swept away by the mysticism here. And we got to go to a small, devout community that welcomed our camera as those dervishes led their community in prayer. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment, and that will be in our show coming up. One little practical tip I learned when you're in Istanbul, every mosque has lots of bathrooms, lots of toilets, lots of places to wash up, because that's part of the ritual of worshiping at a mosque, is washing up. So while you're at those mosques, take advantage of it. Churning sea, the Bosporus, that strait of water that separates Asia and Europe. We went across, you can see the bridge there. You can see how far it is to make an international cruise for about $1 in 20 minutes. You can ride the ferry with the commuters over to the Asian side, and we really enjoyed the side trip to Üsküdar, and that's your exciting opportunity to get away from the big city and just be immersed in a thriving local community. A big part of the scene in Istanbul for most international travelers is the cruise port. It's one of the greatest cruise ports in Europe, and they've got a new state-of-the-art cruise port called Galata Port. And Galata Port is a fascinating port because it can moor 3 ships in a row on this long port. And you can see the pavement there. It actually hides a wall. So when the ship is in, you can see in the distance, they bring up a wall and they put up the wall that emerges from the pavement, and that has all the customs and all of the buses and taxis and formalities of arrival are underground. And that leaves the whole Galata port beautiful for the ships when they're in port, and when the ships are gone, the wall goes down, and it's just a wonderful promenade for the locals. Beautiful, beautiful thing, and that's Istanbul's pride and joy these days. The spice market is a reminder that through the centuries, back in the days of Marco Polo, Istanbul was one of the endpoints of the spice trade and the spice road and the Silk Road. And you step in there today and you see the remnants of that exotic trade. But that just kicks off a whole shopping district. I mean, just look at the intensity here. One of my very favorite things to do when I'm in Istanbul is to just get lost on these streets. I can do it all day long. It's just a parade of people. Everybody's out mission driven, got some chores to do, and it is just a traveler's delight. This is what I love about Istanbul. Oh, and I love the food. Oh, baby. There's so much good food in Istanbul, and you cannot spend much money eating in Istanbul. It's a great opportunity. And experiment with the desserts. Kanafa. This is a very popular dessert throughout the Middle East. Kanafa. Can't get enough of that. One of my favorite things to do in my travels as I'm exploring, working on TV shows and writing guidebooks is to bump into one of our tour groups. This is the perfect view for me. One of our tour groups, they're deep into this tour and they're just all smiles. They're loving their guide. Their guide is Mert, one of my favorite Turkish guides on the left, Mert, and you can see he is a master guide just by the smiles on all of these tour members, all of these people that signed up on a Rick Steves bus tour. And this is why our Turkey tour program is so darn popular. If you want to go to some place that's a little more demanding, a little more culture shocky, you'll want to be in good hands. And that's why I like to have a Turkish guide, not an American guide, but a Turkish guide when we have our groups in Turkey. I want to remind you, culture shock is not something you avoid. Culture shock is why we travel. Culture shock is constructive. It is the growing pains of a broadening perspective. And you just need to have it curated. And that's what a good tour guide does. Mert here, quite obviously, is curating culture shock quite well, judging by the smiles on the faces of his tour members. From there, I flew to Barcelona. And Barcelona, I wanted to go there and update my material. Barcelona is one of the most popular cities in Europe. It suffers from its crowds, and there's news out there that local people are upset with the tourism. I'll tell you, in fact, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second here and just remind you, there's this notion that people are anti-tourism in Europe. In a place like Barcelona, in a place like Venice, in a place like Amsterdam or Bruges or Rome or Paris, there are so many tourists. Now, there is a sense among people who live in these cities that tourists are taking over their realm. They're taking over their markets. They're changing the business tenor of their communities. Airbnb is driving up the rent, so local people can't afford to pay the rent and stay there. They have to go out to the boring concrete suburbs, and tourists get all the nice spots. And when that happens, all of the commerce changes, and it no longer serves the needs of locals, but you get, gifty little edibles and cafes and tourist shops, and it just changes the whole complexion of that neighborhood. So there are people that understandably are opposed to the tourists, but the bad tourists, in the case of a place like Barcelona, they're not you and me who go there and stay in a hotel and buy a dinner and know about the culture and have a thoughtful approach to sightseeing and getting and appreciating the culture. The bad tourists, the tourism they don't like, is the kind of tourism that stampedes in from the cruise ships. Barcelona is a huge cruise port, and there's 3,000 tourists on a ship, and they stampede into town. They don't spend much money, they don't buy dinner, they don't stay in a hotel, and then they stampede back to their cruise ships, and all they leave is garbage and congestion and noise, and locals don't like that. I'll tell you, I've been all over Europe in the last year during this time when people are starting to say enough on tourism, and mayors and directors of tourism and so on, they invite me into their offices and they buy me lunch and they tell me thank you for bringing people here, because we are the kind of travelers that people appreciate. Not stampeding in, people that stay in a hotel, preferably not in an Airbnb, people who buy dinner, people who are curious about the culture, people who are respectful. So that's what I want to do in Barcelona. I've got my books here. This is my favorite souvenir. I brought back the chapters, the books ripped up. That's what I was working on. London, Barcelona, and Prague. And when I think about what I was able to do in Barcelona on this last trip, and then I've got my marked up book, and I take the marked up book and I type in all of the everything I learned. From there, I'll just sweep it into the new editions. I've got my Moleskine, and my Moleskine has all my little notes in it. And when I see a line on it, that means, good. Those notes have been deciphered and put into the laptop, massaged into the text, and they will be in the next edition of this book. So this, I don't know what it is. This is the 7th edition of this book. So the 8th edition will have that update in it. That's why I'm in Europe, and that's what is so rewarding for me in my travels. So to go to Barcelona, I wanted to get up to date on things. And I made sure to get up into the viewpoints because people love their viewpoints. And there's a lot of rooftop bars. So I get to check out the different bars and find out which ones are accessible, even if you don't buy a drink, which ones have the best views, and, you know, just the practical odds and ends. This is the main square in Barcelona. It's called Plaza Catalunya, named after the state, that the nation without a state of Catalunya, of which Barcelona is the capital. Wow. This is the Ramblas, and the Ramblas is a victim of what I was just talking about, over-tourism. And these people are going to their Airbnbs. Nothing wrong with that, but they are messing up the neighborhood, I'll tell you that. So this, you got people rumbling through the streets and staying in Airbnbs and short-term rental places. Landlords just want to profit maximize. And they know they can make 4 times as much renting to these people as to a local person. And that means the rent doubles. They still make a lot more money, and no local people can afford that. And it changes the case characteristic. Here is the beloved Boqueria market on the Ramblas. Look at that crowd. That is the crowd. I don't even recommend the Boqueria anymore. You can't get in there. And if you can get in there, they're not selling things to locals. They're selling things to tourists. All this fun stuff on skewers. It's just not what it used to be. So my mission when I was researching on this last trip was to find alternatives to the Boqueria. And I found 3, and they're very nice, and they're in the book. And then you don't have to just crowd in there and buy stuff with all the tourists. You can actually go shopping with the locals. The scene in Eixample is just amazing. I love that district of Barcelona with the grid plan streets. And, you know, with climate change and everybody moving outside, a restaurant has to have outside seating. If a restaurant in most of Europe these days does not have outside seating, it just closes down in the summer. It's impossible. And you just find a wonderful vibe, a wonderful energy on the streets. This is a typical tapas bar. And one of my favorite things, every night when I'm traveling, I've got a guide that meets me at 6 o'clock. And we work together for 5 hours. And we just charge through the city and visit all the different restaurants, all the different tapas bars, and I get to munch my way through. I get to take careful notes, and I get to come away from there knowing that my hotel listings are really good. One thing I've learned in my travels in London, in Prague, and in Barcelona this year is that during lunch, if you want just a practical, healthy, cheap, and cheery lunch, you go to these very, very, very popular chains. And this is, I forget the name of it, but in Barcelona, there's 3 or 4 chains that all the 9 to 5 crowd just goes to. And you get a healthy salad, or you get a sandwich, and you get a smoothie, or you get your latte. And it's air conditioned, it's modern, it's healthy, it's fast, it's efficient, it's filled with locals, and there's one on every corner. So I'm not looking for anything charming or quaint for lunch. I just want to spend $10 or $12. Like you see right here. You can see on that the menu, the sandwich menu, looks like it's 11 euros. So it's $13 for a sandwich, a drink, and a dessert. Not bad. And for about that much money, you can get a great salad. So you know the drill. That's what I would look for. And then in the evening, that's when you go to the cool restaurant. What I look for well, I look for restaurants of all different levels. But for me, you see right here the red Michelin plaque on the door. Not starred, just Michelin rated. That's what I'm looking for. Star is too fancy, too pretentious, too expensive, but Michelin rated means really good quality and it's more casual. There's a word for it in your bib gourmand. So I find out where the Michelin rated restaurants and I check them all out. And I usually find several that will fit the bill for my guidebook listings. This one in the Champlain was my favorite catch of the day. Man, it was good. Hey, if you're into Banksy, the mysterious street artist, in different cities in Europe, I've noticed there are Banksy museums. Obviously, you don't have any originals, but it's an interesting look at the art, street art of Europe and Banksy. There's a handy one in Barcelona that I put in my book. The streets of Barcelona, thankfully, are traffic-free. And I'm fascinated in Europe by the lack of electricity lines. You don't see any phone lines, any electricity lines up there. Look carefully. There's no telephone poles. There's no wires. Where are the wires? They're under the street. And this is how Europe does it. And it's not that tough to rip things up and do some updating and then put it back together again. And that's how Europe does it. And it's quite a luxurious, kind of open and free and clean skyline as a result. You'll find in Europe these days lots of Instagram people that are going to the same places and getting these shots just looking adorable. And you see it all over Europe. Of course, when you're in Barcelona, you'll see it, the Sagrada Familia. That's the classic shot. As you are checking out this scene, this is at Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors, you'll see one thing women have in common: freakishly big lips. Forgive me here, but I don't know. I just feel like it's disrespectful or something if women have to pump up their lips to be cute. And you see a lot of people that are doing cosmetic surgery around Europe, and a lot of people have what people call Russian lips in Europe. If you go to Positano, every other woman has Russian lips. If you go to a town that's not a jet set resort, just 10 miles to the south on the Amalfi Coast from Positano, nobody has these duck lips. So while you travel, you can probably notice that because it's a real thing. And then you can also notice the pressure for that in our own culture. But there is social pressure. I think it's a fascinating thing that is literally shaping the shape of women's faces. Well, look at that. Sagrada Familia. I've always said if there's one church I want to see completed in Europe, it's the Sagrada Familia. Gaudi was killed 100 years ago. Walking across the street, he got hit by a trolley, tragically. He dedicated the last half of his life to building this amazing church. And tourists are helping it be completed because it's expensive to get in. And it is the most visited site in Barcelona. It's the most beautiful experience to check out the Sagrada Familia, the Church of the Holy Family. And you can see how organic it is with the beautiful, beautiful color tones of the stained glass. And the canopy provided by these beautiful, beautiful arches. It seems like it's inspired by nature, and it is. And it's a very effective place for worship. And it's a very effective place for tourism, as everybody crowds in there to marvel at the wizardry, the mastery of Antoni Gaudi. Now, when you go to Barcelona, Gaudi is the big thing. And it's expensive, it's crowded, it's kind of ridiculous, and you need to be select when it comes to what Gaudi sites you're going to see. There's lots of great modernist architects, but everybody wants to see Gaudi, I think, because it's the one Catalan Art Nouveau architect whose name we can pronounce. Because after all these years, I still cannot pronounce the other equally great architects, but I know Antoni Gaudi and I love him. The Park Güell is a park on the edge of town, on a hill, designed to be a elegant gated community. And it's just organic in the characteristic style of modernisme. Catalan Art Nouveau. And here we have the gateway to that gated community, and it is mobbed with tourists. You got to book it long in advance, and it costs a lot. And I think it's overrated, frankly. I went there with a guide and tried to make it good. But what I've decided is Sagrada Familia, you got to see the church I just showed you. And then there's other Gaudi sites or other Art Nouveau, modernist architectural wonders, like this Palace of Music. Oh, it's just gorgeous. And it's cheap and easy to get an audio tour and go through here and just be blown away by this beautiful Catalan Art Nouveau. You know, you hear this, Jugendstil, and different countries will have their own name for Modernisme or Art Nouveau. And in Barcelona, it just feels like they inspired the others. It's just a beautiful thing. Easy flight from Barcelona to Prague. Prague is the golden city of 100 spires. It's the best preserved major city in Central Europe, I think because it's the one great city of Central Europe that wasn't bombed in any of the wars in the last century. Here we have the bridge, leads across the river to the biggest castle in Europe, the Prague Castle. And we'll be seeing, everybody goes to the castle and just kind of hikes down through all the different palaces within the walls of the castle. We'll be visiting the Lobkowicz Palace, which is right in the middle there in a moment. But the city has the nickname Golden City of 100 Spires. And you can see that with all the spires in the city. It's just gorgeous. A lot of tourists in Prague. But, you know, there's a lot of tourists in all the greatest places, and they all go to the same places. And here they're gathered together to see the medieval clock play at the top of the hour. I find it's fun just to look at all the tourists instead of what they're looking at. But you can walk a little bit away and find wonderful little corners of that adorable city. Just uphill from the castle, you got the Strahov Monastery and the Loretta Church. It's amazing. Here we have Wenceslas Square, and it's like a big boulevard called a square at the top. There's a statue of King Wenceslas, the good king of Christmas Carol fame. Here we have the square today, and it's in the midst of a many years long renovation. And I love to look at the computer generations of what they're gonna have when they finish it. And that's what Wenceslas Square is gonna look like when it's done. Bringing back the retro trolleys and shrinking the access to cars and maximizing the access to pedestrians. That is so European. Look at the beautiful architecture. Wow. For that central boulevard of Prague. When you cross the Charles Bridge, you go through this gate and you just find yourself in that wonderland. The Charles Bridge is one of my favorite bridges anywhere. Prague has a difficult 20th century story, and you can learn a lot of it by going to the Museum of Communism. It's a powerful museum, and learn how the Czech people won their independence. Just down the street from that is the European Union headquarters office. And I happened to be there when they were celebrating the European Union. And it was just fun. It was just a sort of almost like a children's exposition. It would be a beautiful field trip, and anybody can learn like a child the important aspects of how the European Union is running Europe. And you can get a very tasty cupcake with the European flag. Europeans are dealing with the same issues we are. Is marijuana legal? Well, kind of. Can you buy actual marijuana flower? Yeah, you sure can. This is a change I've seen in many countries in Europe now as they lighten up on marijuana. Do they have rallies with angry right-wingers with their Russian flags merging with their local flags with red crosses on top of the European flag saying they don't like the European? Yeah, there's this disgruntled, angry, afraid of immigrants and change brought by the modern world contingency or base that threatens democracy all across Europe. It's quite a powerful, powerful feeling when you step into these demonstrations, and you'll find them in your travels as you venture from one country to the other. Be a little careful about it. You can get caught up in a brawl if you're sloppy. But you'll see a lot going on from country to country, as democracy is threatened. I am a big fan of Alphonse Mucha, and this is more of that beautiful Art Nouveau. And Alphonse Mucha is the great Czech artist from this period. And there's a struggle in Prague of where will Alphonse Mucha's art be, and it has to do with squabbles between his heirs. And in this last year, a new Mucha museum has become the dominant Mucha museum. And I went there and I wrote it up. This is the Mucha window in the cathedral up in the castle, and you can see Mucha's beautiful style. I just can't get enough of his art. And then this is the new museum. It's far better than the old museum, and it's got, the way I understand it, it's got the blessing of Mucha's heirs, so it will continue to be the place to go. But you can see the old posters celebrating Sarah Bernhardt, and that was part of how Mucha gained his notoriety. But you want to have that on your list when you're in Prague, is the Mucha Museum. I'm really fortunate to have as a friend William Lobkowitz. And William, his family was the biggest landowner in the Czech Republic. And then the Nazis took all their land away. And then the communists overthrew the Nazis. The Lobkowitz family got their land back, but then the communists took the land. And then in 1989, the local people threw out the communists, and the Lobkowitz family got their property back. And since then, William's family has had their land, but they go back centuries, and he's the biggest landowner in the Czech Republic. They've got castles and palaces all over the country and amazing art collections. I met him a few years ago. It's like 15 years ago, and we just kind of clicked. And his palace is the big palace up there in the castle. So I dropped by and I saw him again a couple months ago. And I was just really impressed by how he and his family are taking seriously the cultural responsibility of having so much of the Czech cultural patrimony in their domain, and the beautiful things he's doing to share it. He happens to have an amazing music collection with handwritten scores and precious instruments, and so much great classical music history was in Prague, like Vienna, and he's got it right there. They give a concert every day at lunchtime at the Lobkowicz Palace in the middle of the Prague castle. I sure enjoy researching in Prague, partially because they've got the best beer in Europe. I just cannot get enough of the Pilsner Urquell beer in the Czech Republic. That's one reason why people don't emigrate abroad. They can't imagine living without their beloved local beer. And here I am with my list of restaurants. Every night I've got a list of restaurants and I've got a local guide. And I generally make it to all those places. No, not quite all those places, but I can get to 15 places in a night if I keep moving. And that means I have to be careful not to have a beer until I am done. Well, my last stop on this little review of what I've done in the last year is London. And we did a TV show, two or three TV shows on London, but London has changed, especially with its skyline with skyscrapers. The sightseeing's pretty much the same, but this whole regeneration of industrial Rust Belt kind of things is fascinating. London's investment in infrastructure. There's a great sort of energy and a vibe in London, and of course, forests of skyscrapers. So I was busy in London updating my guidebook on my first trip. I was there on 2 different trips. And while I was updating my guidebook, I was working on the script for our TV show because I knew I'd be seeing our crew, and we would dedicate 12 days to shooting a 1-hour special on London, which we just did, and that's what I'm just getting over jet lag from right now. So we met the cameraman Carl, who you know and love if you've seen my shows over the years, and Josh. And this is the first time we did a shoot without Simon. So Josh is now wearing Simon's hat, and Josh is amazing. I'm so thankful for Josh, and our editor, Steve Camarona, retired also. And we've got Patrick now doing our editing. So I have a new TV crew, both in editing and producer. And I'm just very excited about the programming that we're working on right now. Here we have London. Now, if you went to London 15 years ago, none of that would be there. And today you go down the river and it's just beautiful. every day I was in town, I had one of my favorite guides, and these guides they're all in my guidebook. People wonder, how do you find these guides? Well, I experiment with guides all the time. Half of the guides I work with, I didn't know before. They seem to be good online. I book them. I hire them for half a day. I learn about them, and they can be okay. But if they're not really good, if they don't fill a niche, they probably don't get in my book because I just can only have so many guides listed in the book. But here you can see the page from my book where I've got Sean, Katie, Tom, Jillian, Joel, and Nigel. Those would be my guides. And I worked with all of them in this last year. And I know they're all doing well. I know they all appreciate the business that we get. And they're all good, honest guides, blue badge guides. And you've got the price there, £210 for 4 hours and $350 for 9 hours. It's not cheap. London's the most expensive place in Europe for a guide, I believe. But you sure are in good hands when you have your own local guide. What I try to do with when I'm researching is stay in different hotels. Sometimes it's tough because I got my favorite ones and I like to go there all the time. But I just try to make sure I'm dabbling in different neighborhoods for the help of the guidebook. This is a wonderful little hotel. And Peter and Bernie are the men. They're twins. And for like 50 years, they've been running this hotel. And they're amazing guys. They're just famous for their hospitality, and had a great stay with them at Luna Simone. And then I was out and about with all my friends from Oliver, updating the book. There's an area in London it's called, I didn't realize this until just this last trip, Albertopolis. Albertopolis, named after Prince Albert, the only man who could call Queen Victoria Vicky. And Prince Albert was the Prince Charles of the day, and in the sense of really interested in science and culture and so on. And this was back in the 1800s. And they've got all these beautiful museums. This is the Natural History Museum, which has a dinosaur out front in the Evolution Garden. And you step inside, and in this main hall, you see the biggest living creature they ever washed ashore in Ireland, a whale called Hope. And they hang that from the ceiling, and Charles Darwin is at the top of the stairs overlooking it all. And then you've got an animated, a moving and animatronic, I guess is the word, T-Rex that sort of freaks out all the kids. But that's a fun museum. And then these museums are free, by the way. And then across the street, you've got the Victoria and Albert Museum. I just love the Victoria and Albert Museum. I really do. And I wanted to go there and update it for my book. Wanted to kind of put my notebook next to Leonardo's and see who's thinking what here. I love the casts museum. These are replicas of famous pieces of art that students can benefit by studying, and they go back to Victorian times. And when you have a big David like that in prudish Victorian times, you know how the Victorians were famously prudish. Well, you better have some way to get that guy covered up if you've got some nice prudish Victorian lady coming into the museum. So just around the corner, there's a giant fig leaf that you could actually hang on David when necessary. And that's a fun little thing we added into the TV show. Fascinated. The Thames River is really busy, and the Thames River has Uber boats, and they are like vaporettos. Let's put it that way. They're for commuters. They're for business people. They're for Londoners that just want to get around quickly. And then you've got tourist boats. But the river is choppy with those kind of boats, and you can go down the river to the Tower Bridge, and you can check out the Tower of London, built in the 11th century after the invasion by the Normans in 1066. That was the big white tower, the first stone fortress in England. Imagine how imposing that must have been when the Normans established a strong central government in England. Wow, 1066. Well, about 1,000 years later, they built this bridge to celebrate the new millennium, the Millennium Bridge. Beautiful pedestrian bridge, and it goes straight from the Tate Modern Gallery across the Thames River, and it sets its sights on St. Paul's Cathedral. Beautiful construction, designed by Christopher Wren. On the South Bank, from the Tower Bridge all the way back up to Big Ben and the London Eye, you've got something called the Jubilee Walk. It's just a delightful stroll past Shakespeare's Globe Theatre and so much more. Shakespeare's Globe, by the way, this is just an advertisement, but it's a beautiful opportunity to see theater in the round under the stars, just like in the old days, back when Shakespeare was the hottest ticket in town. The Halls of Parliament, beautiful view from the water. You can go in for free when you like to see the hammer beam ceiling, which is about 1,000 years old, and it survived. Look at those beautiful Gothic beams. Wow. And to imagine when the House of Parliament was sitting there in 1833. This is a painting from the Portrait Gallery that shows the houses of, I don't know, this is probably the houses of, maybe the House of Commons or the House of Lords, but much like that today, just people have more modern clothing. You can see the House of Lords and the House of Commons in action if you like. Part of my work is to make sure the museums are still what they're supposed to be. A lot of times you got these hyperactive curators and it messes everything up. So I spent the good part of one day in the National Gallery updating that and making sure all my paintings were located where they're supposed to be for the guidebook. The National Portrait Gallery is a beautiful collection. And with this production of a new TV show, I decided that's the gallery I wanted to feature because I wanted to look into the eyes of the people who put the great in Britain. And we did that right there, from Elizabeth I to Henry VIII, to Shakespeare, to Newton, to Queen Victoria, and on. It's an amazing gallery, and it's right up to date with much more appropriate descriptions and context than they have traditionally when it comes to giving women the respect they deserve and to being honest about slavery and imperialism, which is a big part of the culture of British dominance. The subway is the great people mover in London. I just love the tube, and it's crowded and it's got delays, but it's better than being upstairs in traffic jams in a taxi or in a bus, I'll tell you that. And the great new thing is you don't have an Oyster card anymore. You tap in and you tap out. And I got very good with this. You just tap your credit card or your phone or your watch and you're billed for the ride. And the cool thing about it is, you know, for decades, I was always wondering, should I buy a day pass? Should I buy a week pass? Should I get an early morning pass? With the tap in, tap out system, it figures what is the best arrangement for you, and it sells you the cheapest way to get that coverage. So if you take 3 rides, you've already paid enough for a day pass, you can ride for the rest of the day for free. If you've done that 3 times, you've already paid for a week pass. You can ride for the last 4 days of the week for free. It knows, and all you got to do is tap in and tap out. You don't need to wait in line. And that's how you get around in this amazing people mover. And it's, you know, there's a lot of old-fashioned lines in the tube in London, and there are some new lines. The new Elizabeth line is incredible. This is like the RER in Paris that leaps across the city very, very fast in modern cars, driverless cars. I was at the Docklands, where it says Canary Wharf, and I just kind of settled in, and suddenly I'm in Liverpool Station. That's halfway across London. And if I stayed on it for 6 or 8 more stops, I'd be at Heathrow Airport. So know what the new lines are, know how to use the tube, commit yourself to the tube. It is really great. With our TV show, we wanted to get a big dose of that pageantry. So we were there in the morning to enjoy the changing of the guard. And then I wanted to do something less touristy. So I got plugged into this thing called Park Run. All over Britain and beyond, it's an international movement. They've got park runs every Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And people meet. We met in Hyde Park. And but there's a dozen or so of these events going on just in London alone every Saturday. And people jog and people run. And we filmed it. And it's a great way to make locals and have some friends. So much fun to be appreciating how London's got its act together. And of course, as a TV producer who likes to choose a good spot for an on-camera, I thought, wouldn't that be a nice angle on the Tower Bridge? This is not the London Bridge, by the way. That's a very ugly bridge right next door. This is the Tower Bridge that people often think is the London Bridge of fairy tale rhyme fame. But I saw that and I thought, you know, Let's put a TV host there and you got yourself a good on-camera spot. So I was all excited about that. Got there with the TV crew and producer Josh said, nope, the light's not right. And he was right. So it's hard sometimes to get that all figured out. Once we were trying to shoot here on Parliament Square, and I wanted to get Big Ben and I wanted to get me, and I wanted to have the sun on my face and on Big Ben. And the park that you see in the middle ground there was all in the shade. And Big Ben was well lit, so it's not going to work. But behind a little construction zone, under a tree, there was enough sun on my face, and all the shade was in the middle, and then sun was on Big Ben, and that was a bitchin' on-camera spot. Look at that. That is a cool spot if you're making a TV show to say hi. I'm Rick Steves, back with more of the best of Europe, and this time we are doing London. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. I hope you're enjoying this blitz through my travels this year. I'm enjoying sharing it with you. This is our shot list. This is just every morning I have a shot list with my crew, and it shows what we have left to do on the TV show. So here you can see the numbers are the sequences in the TV show. For an hour-long TV show, there's about 140 sequences. And OC means on camera. And then this is just sequence 56, afternoon tea at the 16. Sequence 44, St. Paul's, Marvel from the top of the dome. 33 and 34, the big rest bus from Trafalgar into the city. Wow. And one thing we had to do when we updated the show, there was a little bit of footage that hadn't changed, you know, a picture of Handel's Messiah or the Shakespeare portfolio, or Big Ben. Those won't change very much over the years. But the people and me changed, so we had to go to all the sites again and shoot me walking in so that we have an up-to-date version. And I got to do some shopping. It's a pretty cool scene to be shopping in London. I didn't want to really focus on the big famous department stores. I wanted to go to the little fancy boutiques and try out a bowler hat and a Panama hat and a top hat and get a soundbite from the man who sells that. And then we looked at this regeneration. London, formerly a tale of two cities, industrial, rundown South Bank, today all sparkling new. Look at that. This is out at the Docklands, and it's just one big office park. I got to say, it suffered a little bit with COVID because now, just like any office park in the United States, the tenant rate is kind of low because there's a lot of people that work from home. But still, it is an impressive scene, and the skyline is amazing. This is the tallest building in London, called the Shard, and you can go up the Shard. We did. I didn't like it very much, so we didn't feature it in the TV show. It's all caged in. It felt a little greedy, and it just wasn't uplifting, but you get a beautiful view from up there. But I did like walking around in the middle of the skyscraper forest, in the shadow of all those skyscrapers, with this Leadenhall Market, which was the roots of all of this kind of economic power. An old market hall right at the foot of all of these skyscrapers, just a short walk from St. Paul's Cathedral. And right there you can go to a building. The skyscrapers are just named by their address. So you go to 20 Fenchurch Street. And if you know 20 Fenchurch Street, you ride the elevator up, and in order to get a permission to build a skyscraper in London, you've got to provide a public viewing area. So this is a free perch halfway up the skyscraper. And what a delightful spot with beautiful landscaping, and you're surrounded by all these wonderful, shiny, creative, gleaming skyscrapers. And they all have their own nickname. That funny shaped one in the back is called the Gherkin or the Pickle. From there you get a view of some of your iconic sites like the Tower of London and Tower Bridge. And we got up there with our crew, and this one, the skyscraper there is called the Walkie Talkie. But I just like going up to these viewpoints and enjoying the view there. And a lot of locals are there for their lunch breaks and so on. And then if you want to go to the Walkie Talkie, you got to pay to buy a drink to go there. So it's going to cost you $15 to go up. But there on the top is what's called the Sky Garden. And it is a magnificent place to be after dark on the top of a skyscraper with a view like this. It's a very complicated and important topic if you want to enjoy the skyscraper scene in London, and that's what I work on in my book. I do want to remind you that we've got we'll send you a link. There's a link right now in the chat section here, but we're going to send you an email tomorrow with links. And one of them is the essay that I wrote about regeneration in London, with information about the skyscrapers and what's happening in London with this whole idea of renovating rundown industrial zones. Here we have the beautiful train station, Pancras train station, and this is now the terminus for the Eurostar train that goes under the English Channel Tunnel. I mean, 2.5 hours from Big Ben to the Eiffel Tower, 10 departures a day, $100 a ride. Wow, you can make Paris a day trip from London quite easily. If you just go to this train station at 7 o'clock in the morning, by 10 o'clock, you're on the Champs-Élysées. Just love the modern infrastructure. Just love the thought that this is where you have all these departures heading straight to Paris, 17 minutes under the English Channel. And here you've got this wonderful statue called the Lovers, which kind of celebrates how this has been a place that for 150 years, people have given each other a hug and a kiss and said goodbye or hello. Across the street is a place called Coal Drops Yard. Yeah, Coal Drop Yards, that's what it's called. And it's a reminder that there was a time before trains that industrial age canals were bringing all the goods in and out of the city. And you still have the industrial age canal there, and now it's got recreational uses instead of industrial uses. And you've got the greenery there on the steps leading down to the canal where the office workers go for their lunches. And it's just a cool scene. It's gentrified, it's thriving. It's formerly full of broken glass and prostitutes and drug addicts, and now it is full of people just enjoying a sunny afternoon. On the other side of the river, you got a former power station, Battersea Station, which used to provide 20% of all of London's energy. And then it was just decommissioned and it stood empty, just scary and dangerous for decades. And then recently they decided to turn it into a shopping mall and a development. So this is the Battersea Station Park, and beautiful condos, beautiful public areas, an amazing inside mall there. And you can actually go to the top of one of those towers, those chimneys. It's a bubble that takes you up to the top from the inside where you see the shopping mall. And from the top, you get this view. And that's just one of many examples of regeneration in London. Once again, my essay on regeneration will come your way, if you like, with a link in the notes from this week's Monday Night Travel. The East End of London is where you get some edginess. And when I'm there, it's a bunch of old buildings, but it's almost like a tsunami wave ready to crash over that and crush it all. Here you see the skyscrapers encroaching from downtown London on the East End, and you've got this charming little district. And the East End is the place for street art. It's the place for immigrant communities. It's the place for food tours. It's a great place for a market that's not as touristy as Borough Market. Borough Market I don't even talk about anymore because it's just crushed with tourists like the one we saw in Barcelona. But Spitalfields Market up here in the East End is wonderful. I like the street art. There's tours about the street art, and it even works in with the food tours. So we hired a food tour guide and we filmed that, and it's just a wonderful way to eat your way through London culture. And boy, I had fun looking for restaurants. This is another one of those Michelin-rated restaurants in the East End. I want to remind you, just like I was talking about in Barcelona, there's for lunch, don't try to win any awards. Just get something that is efficient, healthy, tasty, and not expensive. In museums these days, you've got wonderful cafeterias that, if it's 15 pounds, that'd be about $20. But what I go for, I gotta say, pret-à-manger. Pret-à-manger. It is the perfect fast food for the local 9-to-5 crowds. And it's everywhere. It's where the tour guides go to eat. It's where the office people go to eat. If you just want a simple, cheap, healthy lunch, that's when I go. This is Russell Square near the British Museum. And on a sunny lunchtime, it's filled with people picnicking from the nearby offices. Oh, baby. I love the pubs. Some of the pubs were actually bank buildings. They're really fancy bank buildings. And the banks moved out of town. and people turned the old bank building into a pub. There's two of them. Remember, you can always sit at the bar. I love to sit at the bar in a restaurant when they're all full at the tables and when I want to be close to the action. My favorite experience for a romantic candlelit glass of port would be Gordon's Wine Bar. I fell in love with this scene and I wanted to bring the TV crew here, and I did, so we filmed it. And this is where you get your port right out of the cask, and then you grab a table and you're in this medieval cellar. And again, you got this gorgeous, gorgeous port, rustic bread, beautiful English cheese. Makes for a lovely spot, if you're making a TV show especially. I decided not to include Harrods. Harrods is famous, but it's kind of old news now in London. And I decided not to get my afternoon tea at Fortnum and Mason's, which is twice as expensive as it should be. It just doesn't feel right. I don't want to diss it, but I'll tell you, if you're going to spend $100 for tea, it should be a lot better than what they offer you. And for half that price, for $50, less than $50, this is another place that's good for tea. Wolsey, it's on my book. But what I really found that I like is a small hotel that has a garden. And they do the tea right there. It's called the 16. And I went with my guide, Katie, and we filmed this. And we had a great opportunity to enjoy this ritual. 3 tiers. You got you got your sandwiches without crust. You got your scones with clotted cream and strawberry jam. And then you got all your little sweets and pastries on the top. And then you got all the tea you want. It's a beautiful, elegant way to overeat for an early dinner. All right. Hey, well, that's my what I did on my summer vacation, and what's going on beyond the and I hope this is going okay now. Can you see that okay, Emily?
Yes. Looks good.
Okay. So when I fly home, this is the view I get. This is my hometown of Edmonds, and I thought I would just kind of catch you all up on what's been, exciting in my life since, when I'm not in Europe. But one thing that we do in our company is we love to contribute to our community, and we like to help build community centers. And we build our beloved Waterfront Center in the last few years. And right now we're just finishing the Linwood Neighborhood Center, which is the next over community in Snohomish County, north of Seattle. And this is a giant project. I think it's 50,000 square feet. And it's spearheaded by my church, Trinity Lutheran Church, and the Volunteers of America, Western Washington. And this is just a chance for us. This is Jim Lawrence, one of the leaders from the Volunteers of America. And we're just taking a hard hat tour of this. And I am just so excited about how this is going to contribute to our community. And we just really believe that we're blessed to have such a beautiful community. And our business has been going well, and we like to be the lead donor to help make this happen. So we're putting all of our philanthropic energy into this building right now. A big part of our year has been me kind of discovering this journal I wrote back when I was 23 years old, 60,000 word journal on the hippie trail from Istanbul to Kathmandu. So I learned about this, or I rediscovered this, or appreciated it during COVID. And I wrote this, the journal it was just a diamond in the rough. It was an anthropological dig into a 23-year-old version of myself that now that I'm 3 times that old, I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. My publisher really liked it. And they said, let's make a hardcover book and let's do it right. And we'll get on the New York Times best-selling list. And we did. We got to number 3 on the New York Times best-selling list. But that doesn't just happen. I had to go around the country and give talks. I gave like 14 talks in 14 cities. And it was just a delight. I got to talk to crowds all across the country, sharing the experience I had as a kid going on this ultimate road trip. And I've never had this experience before, and I've given a lot of talks. But in order to go to the talk, people had to buy a copy of the book. And that's how you goose the sales, so you become on the New York Times best-selling list. But with each case, I would have a pile of books. I autographed a lot of books. These are book plates here that I signed, and they were actually bound into the book that I did at a weak moment. I told my publisher, yeah, I'll sign 3,000 or 4,000 book plates like this. But John Yang from public television flew all the way from the East Coast to Seattle to interview me about the hippie trail. Got a lot of press. And that was a lot of fun. And the book is still doing really well. If you haven't had a chance to check out On the Hippie Trail, I think you might enjoy it. My niece is a great street artist in New York and in New Orleans, and she does her art all over the world, this kind of art. She and I schemed up this idea of God giving the travel writer or the traveler the spark of good travel, which is a guidebook. And from that guidebook explodes all the wonders of European travel. And this is what we're calling the art of travel. And Nikki and I spent 6 months just fine-tuning this image of our own Sistine ceiling. And I can just give a whole talk about it if I had the time. It's just so full of all my dreams about Europe. And this is Nikki. And she is now just finishing the placement of this work of art at our office. And she painted it in New Orleans in 15 panels. And she shipped it here. And we had some fancy people that know how to do this lay the panels up into the ceiling. And Nikki is working carefully to minimize the seams and touch it up. And now we've got this wonderful celebration of travel on our ceiling that I am so thankful for Nikki. And if you want to know more about Nikki, her we'll put a link in tomorrow's letter that we send out. Emily, let's remember that. But Nicolina Art, she's a street artist in New York, and her business or her social media handle and so on is Nicolina Art. But she is an amazing artist, and I'm so proud of her and thankful to have that. Another big part of my work this last year has been going around the country to different symphonies and explaining how, if you look at the map in Europe in 1815, you wouldn't recognize a lot of the borders. But if you look at that same map, today, there's all these countries that we know. How did that happen? And what did music have to do with it? And I love to go to the late 1800s and see how romantic music celebrated national causes in Europe. And we do that with beautiful images, and I get to be the tour guide. And that's a new TV show. It's airing all over the country. It was produced by Cincinnati Public Television. And if you're interested in seeing that show, it's called Rick Steves' Europe, A Symphonic Journey. You can go to my website and you can watch. It's a 1-hour concert. And if you like classical music, you will love it. And if you don't like classical music, you will love it. You got to check that out if you're curious. As I've been celebrating for the last couple of years, I'm a grandpa. And this is my daughter's beautiful little boy. He's a toddler now, Atlas. And the big news in our family is Atlas has a little brother. This is Dashiell. And Andy is getting used to not being the total focus of attention. And it's so much fun to be able to have a new little baby in the family, baby Dashiell. And my wonderful partner, Shelley, is Mimi in Dashiell's eyes. And we're just happy to have that little baby in our arms. Shelley and I are going to go on a hike. Every year we like to go to the Alps and go on a hike. That's where I vacation. And in about a month, we're going to be hiking in the Dolomites in one of these tours that provides the hotel and takes your bag to the next place, and then you get a hike without carrying your bag between nice mountain hotels, enjoying scenery like this. We'll be on the Alta Via in the Dolomites. A couple of years ago, we hiked around Mount Blanc, and then after that, we did a hike based in Gimmelwald of the Berner Oberland, and now we are realizing we better get in shape because we got some pretty serious hiking, because I love nothing more than putting a sandwich together at breakfast and hiking, gaining what I call a Mount Si. In Seattle, we have Mount Si, which is a 3,000-foot altitude gain. You go up 3,000 feet to the ridge, you have your picnic, and then you hike into the next valley where your bag is waiting for you at the next hotel. So next time I'm with you all on a Monday night travel show, I would imagine I'm going to be sharing the experience I've enjoyed with Shelley hiking through the Italian Alps.
We did have a lot of excitement in the Q&A tonight, so I have some questions if you have time.
Sure.
Okay, Peppa asks, are tourists allowed to go into places of worship that align with their religion? Can you just go in and join a service?
You can go into places of worship that don't align with your faith, or if you have no faith at all you got to do is be respectful. Fold your hands, and be quiet and observant, and you can sit down in the pew and just soak it all in. I am so fascinated by how many travelers, they go to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome at the Vatican, and they stand behind the barricade as if they're not allowed to go into the sacred area. All you got to do is be a worshiper. You can be a tourist and a worshiper. I'm a Lutheran, and I'm welcome to worship at St. Peter's, the ultimate place for Catholic Christians. I love it. But you just, obviously, you need to respect that place. It's not a place to get a selfie. Put your camera down and go in there. But what I'm thinking of also is mosques. I've been in mosques in Palestine, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Indonesia, in Iran, in Turkey. I love to go into mosques. Every time I'm in an Islamic country, I go into a mosque and I feel very welcome. I've sat cross-legged on the floor talking to imams. I've been there at Ramadan when people are fasting, and then they break their fast and they feed me with their families. And I've been with my camera down, in a mosque, just being worshipful. So that was a long-winded answer, but I think it's a beautiful answer. If you're curious about a place of worship and it seems private, be sensitive, but you can always go in.
Yeah, I think it's the attitude that you go in with, right? If you're respectful.
Yeah, just got to be respectful.
All right. Jeff is interested in finding out if there's an easy and ethical way to rent short-term vacation rentals.
I wouldn't go to the mat on it. It's an ethical thing. If you rent an Airbnb place in a cute little town, you are contributing to the ruination of that neighborhood if you recognize that the people who used to live there can no longer afford to live there. And what it's doing, it's reshaping the whole economic makeup of that community, because now the shops are going to go out of business if they cater to people who no longer live there. So they end up catering to tourists, which just makes it worse, you see. So I think the ethical problem is when you are staying in a fragile neighborhood and you change the makeup of the neighborhood by going for the economy of an Airbnb in that spot. However, if you are staying in an Airbnb in an outdoors area with somebody who's made they've turned in Iceland, they've turned all the sheds for all the barns for the cows into Airbnb places. Now they got so darn many tourists. You stay there, you're just contributing to the economy. You're not ruining a town. So, when we drive around Iceland, you got to stay in an Airbnb because there's just not any hotels anywhere. And you do that by staying in people's outbuildings next to the farm. And I don't think that's as much of an issue, but it's a personal choice you have to make. And I just think it's important to recognize that there's a lot of communities. I always look at old people who have lived their lives in a beautiful little town. Now it's their golden years, and they walk down the street that they grew up on, and nobody is there from their culture anymore. None of the shops sell anything they want, and it's totally overrun by tourists. That's been a total takeover of their community by people with more money. And where does it leave them? Out in the nondescript suburbs. Raphael, my favorite driver in the Amalfi Coast, he's never gotten around to buying a place to live. He's always paid rent. And I've known him for 30 years. And now his family's in crisis because they can no longer afford the rent to their apartment that they've always lived in. And he's a very hardworking guy. And now he's got to drive an extra half an hour every day to get into town because he's been pushed out by the Airbnb crowd.
Oh, that's a shame. I was going to say that you and I have known for a long time that if a hotel also offers vacation or apartments, that's a really good compromise because you're staying in a bigger place than a hotel room, but you're still sort of staying within the microcosm of a business, right?
Yeah, although hotels nowadays are buying a lot of places as the demand gives them the opportunity to grow, and it's that economic tug of war. I like staying in a hotel from an ethical point of view, and I enjoy it. There was a time, I think, when Airbnb was cheaper, but if you go to an Airbnb in Barcelona, I don't think it's going to be that much cheaper than a hotel. I don't know. Do you know anything about that, Lisa?
I know, well, I don't know so much about it in particular in Barcelona, but I know that the cleaning fees for Airbnb have gotten astronomical. And
You know, it's become greedy, and I just feel like a good, simple, basic family-run hotel is my option, and I feel really good about it because I feel like I'm contributing better to the community when I do that. But I don't want to be high and mighty about that because I don't really have, I don't know what the right answer is.
okay, well, Lori has heard conflicting opinions regarding taxis in Rome. And since you were just in Rome, um, do you use taxi apps like FreeNow or IT Taxi, or what do you recommend for car service when it's just too far or too hot to walk?
I use taxis in Rome all the time. I think they're great, and I just flag them down, or I go to a taxi stand. When I'm with a group and I've got people who are tired and want to go home, I just find a taxi and anybody want to go home, it's a free ride home. Three people get in and they go home. I mean, it's not a free ride. I give them 15 euros or something. But yeah, I think Rome's a great taxi town. I forget offhand how it relates compared to Uber, but whenever I come into a new town, I have to kind of decide, is this a good Uber town or is this a good taxi town? Remember, the taxi lobby is very strong, and in a lot of cases, they have one, meaning there are Ubers, but they are essentially taxis that you hail by Uber, and you pay the taxi rate. In other cases, Ubers are there, they're right there, they're cheaper, they're better, they're a slam dunk good deal. In London, there's a problem with Ubers because they cannot go on many of the roads that taxis can go on. Taxis cost more, but they're legit as far as the government letting them go into the congestion-free zones and on bus lanes and that kind of thing. So you'll get from A to B much quicker by a taxi than an Uber in London.
Yeah, I don't, I mean,
Yeah.
I've used an Uber once in London just for the experience, but there's no reason. Taxis are the way to go in London.
In fact, I'm not even that in. I like taxi for the experience, but they're expensive and they're slower than the tube. So if you're a good walker, I was on a taxi to go out to the Tower of London, and I was like, I looked at the map and I thought, well, this is easy. You'll just drive along the river and go right down to the Tower of London. Got in a taxi. He couldn't go that way. He had to go across the river. He was tooling around, and it was 20 minutes, and he was farther away from the Tower of London than when I picked him up. And he wasn't ripping me off. He just was a victim of one-way roads and detours and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I had Sean, our guide, waiting for me at the tower for a guided tour at 10 o'clock or something. And it was already 10 o'clock and I was not even near it. So I just got off the taxi, I paid him, and I got in the tube, and I got there in 10 minutes. So you can get there regardless of what kind of snarled traffic there is up in the daylight. If you just go down the stairs, hop on the tube, bam. Every 2 minutes there's a tube coming, and it's crowded. You saw me standing there with all those crowds, but it's the way to get from A to B if you don't want to screw around, and that's why so many people are dedicated to the tube, and I just love it.
Well, and if it's crowded in the tube, that means it's rush hour and it's going to be crowded on the street as well.
You got it. Yep.
All right. I didn't realize this, but I did 2 questions from Peppa. She was very active tonight. She is very curious if your parents traveled like, vagabondy when you were small, and did you ever travel with them when you were an adult?
My parents were great travelers, and what they liked to do was camp and go in their boat up in the San Juan Islands here in Washington State. They finally went to Europe to visit the piano factories when my dad, who was a piano tuner, started importing pianos from Germany. And while we were over there, they went up to visit relatives in Norway. And this was the dawn of the democratization of travel, when there was cheap charter flights for the first time, and when Arthur Fromer's book was it, Europe on $5 a day. And I remember my dad drove, my mom was in charge of picnics, and we had this guidebook that we just loved, Arthur Fromer, And that was my first experience. And it could be done really cheap with a rental car. And they loved it. Later on, when I became a tour guide and everything, my dad was my biggest fan and promoter. I don't know if you remember him, but he just would always rave about what we were doing. And my mom and dad many times would join a Rick Steves tour. And I was so proud, for instance, to help them go on a tour to Turkey, because my dad was a little bit wigged out about, Muslim countries and so on. And my dad was just a typical American. He got over there and he realized these are beautiful souls. I'm so thankful I got to go to Turkey and make friends with a different society. So yeah, they traveled. They were very enthusiastic travelers as they grew older. And then when they grew too old to take a Rick Steves tour, they would take the Grand Circle, and that was really good for them.
I saw them at the airport once when they were on their way for that, and they just had that spark of joy. They were getting ready to go on another trip.
Oh, they loved it.
Liz would like to know, do you get the sense that tourism protests are having an impact on these issues?
Tourism protests.
The anti-tourism protests or the
Oh,
housing protests in Barcelona.
no, I don't. I think they're venting. I don't blame people for being up in arms. Their city's being stolen from them by tourists. But I think the main thing is for us as travelers to recognize what kind of an impact we're having on the world, whether it's climate or whether it's congestion or whether it's changing the economic metabolism of a community, whether it's degradation of cultural treasures. I mean, there's so many good things about tourism, and there's so many potential bad things about tourism. And if we can all just be, well-mannered tourists, we will be more welcome. And it's important that we recognize that, yeah, it's a privilege to be able to go to a country and vacation there. And sure, we're buttering their bread with the money we spend, but they're also giving up their squares and their parks. I remember when COVID hit, my friends in Rome were saying, wow, this is the first time we can actually go to our squares, our piazzas, and enjoy them.
All right, last question and an easy one. Karen would like to know, do you have a must-see site in London that is not a typical tourist spot?
A must-see site in London that's not a typical tourist spot. My must-see site would be take a London Walks tour from an offbeat angle of London that you are interested in that's not Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is the hold your nose and make money walking tour in London. Nobody likes to give it, but tourists always want to see the Jack the Ripper stuff. But there are so many different angles of London. And if you just go online, it's a great, I think it's just walks.com, I think is their website, but London Walks it's called. And I know the guy that runs it, and it's struggling actors and tour guides looking for work that all do these walks, and they're so energetic, they're so entertaining, and there's so many slices of London. That's what I really like. You could do that for the rest of your life. You could take 2 London walks every time you went to London, and that's what I would recommend.
I'm gonna get whiplash from agreeing with you. It's
That's good.
so true.
All right.
Well, Rick, I would like to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, it's a pleasure. I promised you I would be not more than an hour and a half, and I was 5 minutes longer than that. I'm sorry about that, but I just got carried away because it's so much fun to share our love of travel. And I've had a great year. Our staff is doing better than ever. It just seems like we're really on a roll at Rick Steves Europe, and we'd love to be part of your travels. So thank you all very much, and happy travels, and we'll see you soon, I hope.